Hi guys. Today we are going to talk a little bit about something from Module 7, Day 3. We're going to be talking about figurative language. So our reading focus today is on figurative language. Basically, what are similes, metaphors, hyperboles, and personification? Your learning target today, I can identify figurative language used in a tall tale. So we are going to read through a tall tale and we're going to find all the figurative language. But before we do that, we have to talk about what is figurative language. Figurative language is when words do not mean exactly what they say. So for example, here's a picture of a toaster and underneath it says the toast jumped out of the toaster. Now, we all know that toast can't actually jump, right? So that's an example of figurative language. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, what's the point? Well, writers use figurative language to create a special effect or feeling. And they exaggerate or compare things as a way to help readers understand their ideas. So there's many types of figurative language, but today we're going to focus on these four: similes, metaphors, hyperbole, and personification. Similes and metaphors, usually when we talk about them together because they're both used to make a comparison. So we're going to start with similes. A simile is a comparison of two unlike things using the words like or as. So for example, if I said my car is as big as a boat, that would be a simile because I'm using the word as to compare my car to a boat. Cars and boats are not the same. And when I read my car is as big as a boat, I probably know that this car is really big and it fits a lot of people and maybe it has more than 4 doors. So a metaphor, metaphors are also used to make a comparison, but they compare two unlike things without using the word like or as. They often use the words was, is, or are to compare. So let's look at this statement in the form of a metaphor. It would just be, my car is a boat. Well, boats are really big, so that must mean that my car must also be really big. So we're going to do a quick simile and metaphor review. Here we have 4 statements, and I want you to pause the video, grab a pencil, and write down an S if you think the statement is a simile, and an M if you think it's a metaphor. Okay, I hope you're back, and we are going to go over this. So the clouds were as white as sheep. That is a simile. Why is it a simile? Well, because it uses the word as to compare the clouds to sheep. Let's look at the next one. She is as sweet as candy. That's also a simile because, again, it's using the word as to compare a girl to candy. Remember, when you use a simile or metaphor, you're comparing two things that are not the same. So we wouldn't say candy is as sweet as candy because we're not comparing unlike things. So we want to be very different in the things that we compare. Let's look at the third one. The bar of soap was a slippery eel. This one's tricky. Yep, it's a metaphor. And it's a metaphor because it's just using the word was to compare a bar of soap to a slippery eel. And then last but not least, Bob runs like a deer. That is a simile because it uses the word like to compare Bob and the deer. All right, great work, guys. Let's look at hyperbole. So hyperbole is an exaggeration of the truth. What does that really mean? Well, writers use hyperbole to make something sound worse or more dramatic than it really is. And I'm going to show you an example of hyperbole, and you're going to think to yourself, oh, I know what that means. I actually hear statements like that all the time. So what if I said, my backpack weighs a ton? You know my backpack can't really weigh a ton because I wouldn't be able to carry it. But you also know now that my backpack is very heavy. So let's do a quick hyperbole activity. There are 3 statements here. So I want you to pause the video, grab a pencil, and I want you to look for the one that's not a hyperbole. So remember that hyperbole is an exaggeration of the truth. And if you think to yourself, hyperbole is something that can't actually be true. Okay, I hope you're back. And remember, we are looking for the statement that's not a hyperbole. So let's look at the first one. She was laughing her head off at my joke. Can you laugh so hard that your head falls off? I don't think so. So that is a hyperbole. Remember, hyperbole is an exaggeration of the truth. And if you think to yourself, something that can't actually be true. Let's look at the second one. I am hungrier than my best friend. Well, is it possible to be hungrier than your best friend? Yeah, maybe it is. Maybe she had more breakfast than you did. So that's not a hyperbole because it's not an exaggeration. You could, in fact, be hungrier than your best friend. And then last but not least, I could sleep for a year. Could you sleep for a year, even if you tried? No, so that's a hyperbole. All right, guys, great work. Last one, we are going to look at personification. Personification is when writers use words that make animals or objects act like people. So an example of this might be, the bird sang a beautiful song. Personification is a way for writers to make an object or an animal easier for the reader to relate to or understand. My favorite example of personification, if you've seen it, is in Beauty and the Beast, where all of the clock and the candles, everything comes to life. That's a really good example of personification because in real life, those objects wouldn't be able to talk and sing and dance. So in the example, the bird sang a beautiful song. We know that birds don't actually sing songs with words, but the example helps us to imagine what this bird might sound like. All right, so here's a quick personification review. Pause the video and grab a pencil, and you are going to use the pictures and the word to write a sentence that includes an example of personification. Okay, I hope you're back, and let's go over some examples of sentences with personification. So in the first example, we have a picture of what looks like some clouds, but they're blowing, so that usually means wind, and then plus the word howled. So let's write a sentence about the wind howling. The wind howled at me from outside my bedroom window during the storm last night. Now, we all have been in the situation where you're in bed and you hear the wind and it sounds really like an animal howling. But does the wind actually howl? No. The next one, there's a picture of a sun, and then it wants us to add the word glared. When you glare at someone, it's when you're kind of like, it's not usually a happy look. So let's make a sentence with the sun and the word glared that includes personification. I started to feel sweaty as the sun glared at me from up in the sky. So we're giving a human characteristic to the sun by saying that it's glaring up. Okay, so let's quickly review. We said that writers use figurative language to create a special effect or feeling. And then we talked about a few different types of figurative language. So Geraldine Nolan, who's the author of Thunder Rose, made the story exciting by describing events in a vivid way. And she did this by using figurative language. So let's practice identifying and understanding examples of figurative language as we read Thunder Rose. I'm going to read to you, and as I do, I want you to think about how the figurative language adds to the meaning and tone of the story. So in other words, when you hear an example of what is figurative language, think to yourself, how does that allow me to visualize the character, and what sort of feeling does it give me while I'm reading? Okay, so this is page 86 from Thunder Rose, and I am going to read it to you while I'm reading. Remember that you're looking for examples of figurative language, and then you're thinking to yourself, how does that help the story, or how does it help me as a reader? The next morning, when the sun was high yellow in that billowy blue sky, Rose woke up hungry as a bear in spring, but not the least bit ornery. So right away, we have an example, hungry as a bear in spring. What kind of figurative language is that? Do you remember? That's right. That is a simile. As a bear in spring. Remember, a simile compares two unlike things using the word like or as. So it's comparing Rose to the bear. So by comparing Rose's hunger to a bear who's just been woken up from hibernation in the spring, right? The author shows the reader that Rose is starving. All right, I'm going to keep reading. Minding her manners, she politely thanked her ma for the milk, but it was not enough to quench her hungry thirst. Rose preferred instead to drink her milk straight from the cow. Her ma was right grateful to have such a resourceful child. No other newborn had the utter strength to lift a whole cow clear over her head and almost drink it dry. In a moment's time, Rose did, and quite daintily so. She was as pretty as a picture. So we have another example here of figurative language. She was as pretty as a picture. What do we think about that? It is another simile. That's right, because it's saying that Rose was as pretty as a picture. It's comparing Rose to a picture. So this simile describes how beautiful Rose is so that the reader can actually visualize her more clearly. And remember, visualize means that you can actually get a mental picture in your head. Figurative language does a really good job of helping us as the reader visualize. She had the sweetest disposition, but don't let yourself be misled. That child was full of lightning and thunder. Okay, so what do we think about the last example of figurative language in this paragraph? Full of lightning and thunder. What do you think? That's right. That is a hyperbole because you can't be really full of lightning and thunder, right? It's an extreme exaggeration. So it's a hyperbole because it's meant to exaggerate Rose's personality. Okay, so what I want you to do now is read this again, this passage on your own, and as a closing question, something to think about and discuss, how does the hyperbole at the end of the paragraph help to develop Rose's character? So remember we said that the last sentence, that child was full of lightning and thunder, that's a hyperbole. So how does that help develop her character? And maybe if you need a little help answering that question, you can think to yourself, how does this statement about Rose's personality help you as a reader understand Rose more clearly? All right, guys, you did a really great job today learning figurative language and finding it in the text. And I look forward to learning again with you again soon. Bye.